All right, here we go. Another episode of the Throwing Bones MMA podcast. I'm your host, Adam Gerber, and I made some horrible picks last week that made me look like a right dumb dummy. And we're going to talk about that this week. Do we start with the main and the co-main event? Do we start with the biggest failure of last episode, which was the prediction of the main and co-main event? Oh God, these two, not so much the Anthony Smith one, but these two fights together made me feel old, like an old fan, because it felt like not that long ago where I was picking the younger up-and-comers over seemingly everyone's past favorites. The people who you've grown up watching, you've watched them become established, and they've been a veteran to you, but they've never been anything but at the peak of their game and on top of it. So when they start declining, that can sort of sneak up on you. You know, we're talking about Robbie Lawler first. Okay, we'll just go over the main event quick. Thank God that was 3 rounds, because I couldn't have been more incorrect about the way I called that fight, because I think if I remember correctly, I was thinking that Anthony Smith would have trouble on the feet, which he did. I didn't think he would have trouble finding range and getting in range, which he really did. Had a huge problem getting within the range of Rakic. But I thought he would really shine in the grappling exchanges between the two. And he did not. Like, Rakic has made very impressive developments in his grappling game and his ground game since that Volkan Ozdemir fight, and that's evident. Like, super impressive. And I guess on top of that, there's a lot to go over. And I'm sort of disorganized in my thoughts here. What do I start with, you guys? I start with giving everyone praise. That's what I start with, okay? You should start with praising the guys. Otherwise, it feels like you're just taking away from their victory by shitting on the person that lost. So first thing we're going to do for this fight, Alexander Rakic came in. He absolutely handled Anthony Smith in an area of the fight that I didn't think he would be able to compete in. So that's one thing. Incredibly impressive showing from him there. Like I said, the developments he's made in his grappling, and specifically his takedown defense since that Volkan Ozdemir fight, absolutely on point. Could not have been more impressed with that. His leg kicks and just in general, the way he works his kicks from range to sort of it's really fantastic the way he does it. He'll be slapping your leg, and when I say slapping, he'll be laying that baseball bat of a right leg into your thigh and into your body, switching kicks so well. And anyone, especially like Khabib, I think even put out a little interview this week about it. Anyone will tell you, if you don't want people being able to set up their range and to kick you like that, what you need to do is to constant pressure, right? The thing about Rakic is that his boxing is just as good, and now he's got that good. He's got that solid takedown defense. His boxing and the power he throws in his hands he throws dynamite. And so what he does is he sets you up with his jab from range. He'll be tagging you with that jab, and when you step just out of the range of that jab, he starts firing roundhouse kicks, whether it's at your leg or at your body. Now, the number one, unless you can kick with him, which I would, you know what, I'm going to go right out and say, I don't think there's a single fighter, especially after that performance, I don't think there's a single fighter in the light heavyweight division that's going to be able to stand there and kick with Rakic. To me, he seems like he's almost the Edson Barboza of light heavyweight. And so what he does is he's pounding you from the outside with those kicks, which forces you to either step all the way out of range where you can't do anything, right? So it's either at mid-range, you're getting jabbed in the face, You step a little bit back, you're getting slammed to the leg and body. The only thing you have after that is to close the distance, right? To essentially charge in with pressure, and he's such a great counter fighter, he's ready for that pressure. There was one specific instance where he's kicking, it was in the first round, right before that knockdown from the leg kicks, he's kicking Anthony Smith's leg and then leaving his front leg pretty far out as bait and loading up on his rear hand, and then as soon as Anthony Smith goes to kick that front leg, Rakic just explodes forward now that he's in range and just clocks Smith across the face with a huge power shot. The way he uses those kicks to set up the rest of his boxing is unreal, right? And essentially what that came down to was, unless Smith wanted to stand and trade at range, which he should have, if you saw, like, he was landing shots in that second round while they were on the feet. But the thing with Rakic is that he's constantly giving you things to think about from every single different range. When you get caught up in that, your natural instinct is going to be to dive into the clinch, which is what Anthony Smith did essentially over and over and over again, trying to get some semblance of a control against the fence or a takedown. And now his takedown defense is seemingly excellent, right? And so essentially this strategy that hadn't been working for Smith since the first round, since the first round, it was obvious that Smith wasn't hanging with him on the ground, or at least wasn't going to be able to implement any sort of meaningful offense in a grappling exchange, whether that was, after the fight, he sort of accounted that to the strength and his ability to bulk up at the weight class. But really, Rakic just had his number, and he had his number on the feet psychologically. I think if Smith could have switched stances and dealt with those leg kicks, I don't think at any point he was in a crazy amount of danger on the feet. He got lit up at certain points, and the second that started happening, the second the pressure started to pour on, the second the volume started to land, he would immediately dive in for a takedown or dive in for a clinch, which was already established as a failing strategy. He just kept going back to it. And I guess this is where we're sort of, going away from the praise to Rakic, and we're going to start critiquing Smith here. Is I don't know what he was thinking at all, and not to mention he comes out, he looked flat physically. He's more well defined. He seems to have more muscle mass. In this, he came out flat. He didn't come out fast like he did in the Glover Teixeira fight. He seemed sluggish. He seemed hesitant right from the get-go. And he's talking about maybe moving back down to middleweight or what have you. He's got almost 50 fights. I think he's up there in fight years. And to me, we got a couple other older guys on this card that we're going to be talking about as, either they're over the hill or they're right at that peak where that line happens. There's sort of this line, like, obviously there's people at the peak of their game, and then way before you ever consider retirement, you're going to be dropping down from that physical peak. But after that physical peak, there's a line you cross where, and Cormier mentioned it after he confirmed his retirement this week. There's a line you cross where you stop being able to hang with the elite, right? You stop being able to win a fight purely on technical acumen like you used to. Every single fight starts to become a war, right? It starts to become this gritty, and Ricardo Lamas had one of those this night against Bill Algeo, right? And it happens where you start having these wars, your precipice for competitiveness starts to drop. All right, and that level of fighter where you can comfortably win starts to drop and drop and drop until you're having these war of attritions, these gritty battles that used to only happen with this fighter at the very top very tip top of the rankings is now happening. Every single fight is something they need to overcome just by way of how much more athletically with it, the new breed is. And we saw this with Anthony Smith, even though he's not older in age. I think in fight years, he's probably one of the oldest fighters on the roster as far as damage taken, as far as battles had, as far as, the wear and tear on his tires. We had one of those from Robbie Lawler. We had one from Ricardo Lamas. And all of us sort of gave us this different window into it. And I think Anthony Smith is past that. I think Anthony Smith is past that point where, I don't know. I don't see him competing at a top level, at middleweight or at light heavyweight. And more lately, which is, to me, this is more concerning. A guy who's built his name off of late fight comebacks. At the very least, I think the Lionheart nickname a lot of people have called into question about his guts and his determinations in these last couple fights. But you look back to like the Hector Lombard fight, some of his fights at middleweight, he never quit, right? He may have been defeated. He may have been mentally defeated. He may have been physically defeated in some of these fights, but he never just checked out, And as soon as he got dropped by those leg kicks in the first round, it seemed like he checked out. He came back for a little bit in the second, landed a couple good right hands, and then after that, he just completely checked out. And that's become a recurring theme for him. Is not that he gets down and can't get back, or he gets down and gets demoralized. It's that one thing doesn't go his way, and he just completely checks out of the fight. And that's where, when you start going against your basic psychology as a fighter like that, I think it's time to hang him up. And I think this theme can carry directly into the co-main event with Robbie Lawler and Neil Magny. Robbie Lawler wasn't even in that fight for a minute. It's Anthony Smith's problem is that he starts, and then once something doesn't go his way, he checks out. Well, Lawler looks like he's checked out before he's even stepped in the ring lately. And especially against Neil Magny. And I know that, I might sound a little bit salty about this because my prediction last week was that, Robbie wasn't that far gone. He might have just had a loss to RDA and a loss to Colby Covington. But, those people are pretty far and away. There's a huge gap between those fighters and someone like a Neil Magny. And you know what? I got to eat some crow on this because Neil Magny went in there and looked better than he's ever looked. All right? And especially his distance striking, the way he was slipping, dipping in and out of range, coming back in and using his reach was some of the most expert striking I've ever seen from Neil Magny. When it's usually fairly grimy and gritty, this was elegant. This was poised. This was a beauty to watch. He put a striking clinic on Robbie Lawler, which is something I never thought I would have said. And I think a lot of people wouldn't have thought they would have said. And like he Khabib'd him, like obviously without the intense beating, but the way he just kept chain wrestling him down to the ground, landing his strikes as he got up. As soon as Robbie sort of became attuned to the strikes defensively, he was getting taken down, and he just had no answer for the takedowns, which is, again, very unlike Robbie Lawler. He's usually excellent. Sorry, 1 second. It's like coffee I drank at 12 o'clock at night. He's usually excellent. He's usually excellent at defending the takedowns. I think that's one of his best stats is takedown defense, And yeah, I can't get over how un-Robbie Lawler like that was. I think back in the day, old Robbie would have kicked Neil's legs completely out from under him and bludgeoned him from there, starting at the body and working his way to the head. But he just had nothing. It's like he can't throw. It was the same thing as in the Colby Covington fight. He just didn't throw punches. Like he just didn't participate in the fight, which is again, as far as the psychology of Robbie Lawler goes, one of the most antithetical things you could ever say about Robbie Lawler. If you went back 3 years ago and I said, hey, not only is Robbie Lawler going to lose to Neil Magny, he's barely going to throw a strike while he does it. You wouldn't believe me. And that's exactly, Daniel Cormier used this performance from Robbie to justify his retirement. He says, at a certain point, you're not challenging the top guys anymore, and you just sort of move down the ladder and having these super difficult fights with guys that you shouldn't really be having difficult fights with. And eventually they just start making a name off of your name. And he's exactly right. It was sad to see Robbie like that. Not because you don't like Neil Magny, but just because that was a shell of who Robbie Lawler used to be. And you hate to see, you would like Neil Magny if he's going to beat Robbie Lawler, to beat the Robbie Lawler that comes to everyone's mind when you say that, when you say the ruthless one. But just a depressing showing. And that's another one where it's like, what are you sticking around for, Robbie? Because that's not even the type of fight that Robbie likes. Say for the enjoyment of the fight, that's not the type of fight that Robbie likes. You can go back through his catalog and watch him grinning like a psychopath throughout entire 25-minute fights. He wasn't having fun for any of that. You could see on his face how upset he was at the way the fight was going, and B, I'd assume his own performance. It's just a hesitant, sad showing from Lawler after that one. And you know what? And a flawless performance from Neil Magny. I really don't want to take anything away from him, even though we're saying the fact that Neil Magny can beat you means that you should retire. It's tough to say that without sounding very, very disparaging towards what is an elite level fighter who's only increasing the complexity of his game as he goes along. I don't think anyone really expected Neil Magny to have this sort of late career resurgence, but apparently all you need to do is start losing your hair and you get certain other superpowers, right? Same thing happened with Robbie, late career resurgence, came back a bald man and ran all the way to the championship. So it's nice to see that happening for Magny. He's been in the game for so long. He's got some of the most UFC fights out of anyone. He's got some of the most UFC welterweight wins, second only to GSP. And it's good to finally see him getting some respect on his name, especially from people like me. I put a lot of I still didn't believe it, And even now that he won, the talk is more about how shot Robbie Lawler is than how fantastic he looked. But as far as putting together his chain wrestling and mixing that in with his long-rangey striking, that's a problem at welterweight. That's a big problem at welterweight because people can do one, but they can't really do both. And I'm very excited to see where he moves up next and who he fights next. It's tough where he goes without getting a rematch. I'd almost like to see him go against RDA again because of the way that went. I was live at that fight. I was at that one, and the way RDA just cut through him like butter. It'd be interesting to see how Magny deals with that, because it really was just Dos Anjos came out, kicked him so hard in the leg that they went shot out from under him. He fell down. Dos Anjos hopped on him and threw on an arm triangle and submitted him right away. That Neil Magny and the Neil Magny I saw this weekend are two completely different fighters. And you know what? At that point in Neil Magny's career, when he fought RDA, I would have said he's kind of done all of the adapting and the learning that he's going to do. You saw a lot of people, they reach this certain age and it's not about pushing their game any further. It's not about adding tools to their game. It's not about adding different dynamics to the way that they set up their style and the way they methodically go through a fight in order to win it. It's just sort of, here are my tools. This is what I have. How can I hone them and make them as precise as possible, right? But that constant evolution is something that It's a testament to his longevity, and it's a testament to him having the second most wins in welterweight history. And you know what? It's the most interesting thing about the sport. It's people who overcome either physical limitations, stylistic limitations, or even just certain issues inside the cage, the way that they can implement their mind, primarily their mind, in order to set up a sequence of techniques in order to deal with those threats. I think Neil Magny probably shows some of the best fight IQ in the game at the moment, or in that welterweight division at least. And I think he'd be a problem for a lot of people. And especially after that performance, I mean, if you compare that performance with, let's say, Colby Covington's performance against Robbie Lawler, they're pretty comparable. The only difference is Neil Magny looked a lot more technically sound on the feet. Depressing fight, but also an impressive fight, depending on which angle you see it from. Alexa Grasso versus Jin Young Kim. Oh, Alexa Grasso is bae. Alexa Grasso is bae, and she has been since she came over from Invicta. I remember watching her in Invicta, and even when she came over to the UFC, and she's had so much growth in her last 2 or 3 fights. The way that she's really utilized, and I mean, she was always a boxer, so that's weird to me that these great steps forward for her would come from just making her boxing that much better suited to MMA. But oh my god, the way she mixes in body shots mid-combinations. She's always starting with a combo, ending with a combo, keeping her head off of the center line as she's throwing combinations. Holy shit, what a boxing clinic she put on. That was... I mean, Jin Young Kim, she landed a couple good shots in the first, but after that, Alexa Grasso put on an absolute striking clinic for the next 2 rounds of that fight. It was supremely impressive. Supremely impressive. And you know what? She might not be able to hang kicking range. She might not be able to hang in the clinch. She might not be able to hang grappling with Valentina Shevchenko. But I tell you what, if they just had a boxing match, that would be an interesting fight, because that was some of the most impressive combination punching, accurate punching, and then she hits with power when she needs to. It's tap, tap, not always throwing. It's tap, 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 sees the shot, wham! It's beautiful technique to watch. And that's just some of the best striking you will see from female fighters, period. That is what separates your ability to do that, your ability to hang in the pocket, your ability to throw combinations body head that aren't just rote, that are in real time, reading the shots of your opponent, combinations, and to also throw them with power, is something that really sets the elite of the women's divisions apart from the underlings, right? And with this performance, even though it won't move her that far up in the rankings, because Jin Young Kim wasn't that highly ranked of a fighter, and I think Grasso was unranked at bantamweight going into this, or flyweight, going into this. That's something to me that sets her out as someone to watch. I think, and it's so funny to me how Grasso and Aldana came into the UFC with such hype around them. Coming from the same camp, they both kind of fizzled. Both kind of came in and showed really one-dimensional fight styles. And now they're both working their way up to title shots. I mean, Aldana is challenging Holly Holm. They're both working their way up to title shots. And what's really changed is that their footwork has gotten incredible. Their fundamental boxing has gotten so much cleaner. Their willingness to throw in combination has gone from, when they're doing well and they see their openings, to every single time they throw. And the biggest thing is, if you look at them compared to a couple of years ago, is they've both gotten jacked. They've both gotten so much more muscular than they used to be. And that's tremendously helped with their ability to make this style work for them, because at the women's divisions, a lot of the time they can't throw, or they don't throw with enough power to hurt the other person and to really make them respect their power. And that's the biggest advantage that they bring, is that they can actually hit hard enough that throwing in combination means the other person needs to take stock and back up and can't just hang in the pocket trying to land their own shots. As far as I'm concerned, Alexa Grasso is one of the most entertaining female fighters to watch and a must-see. Jin Kim, I would say that about as well. I'm always gonna tune in for one of her fights. The power, just the raw power that she hits with, even if she doesn't have the greatest speed or the greatest setup. When that right hand lands, it's like she's got a bloody fist filler in. It's like she's hitting you with a cinder block. So that was a great fight. That was, to me, like one of the fights of the night. I enjoyed that tremendously. Another one of the fights of the night, Ricardo Lamas versus Bill Algeo. And let me tell you, Ricardo Lamas could have easily lost this decision, getting rocked multiple times, dazed multiple times, almost finished at certain instances. But again, it was his, and this is what we talk about, is it was his veteran savvy and his octagon experience and his fight IQ that let him eke out that win against the much more athletic, much harder hitting, the person who did much more damage to him, right? But just didn't have those little nuances inside the cage for how to not let the fight slip away from you, and how to not let the other guy sort of win inch by inch, right? A lot of these little guys, a lot of these newer guys, they win on the big moments, they win on the flashiness, they win on the knockouts. They don't know how to grind out points and grind out a decision after they've been in trouble, and that's where Ricardo Lamas' veteran savvy, came into play. But it's also where you can see he's on his last legs. If he had to dig that deep and go that far and come that close against a newcomer like Bill Algeo, how much left does he really have in the tank, right? How many more times can he go out there? And I think he said he's considering retirement. How many more times can he go out there until, he won't be able to turn the tides like that? He'll just go out when he eats a knee, To me, I couldn't have thought of a better fight for him to go out and retire on, because I think they're all downhill from here. So to me, it's upsetting that he's sitting on it. I think a lot of these guys should have retired this weekend and just didn't. Impa Kasanganye. He is an absolute brick shithouse, is what he is. I felt bad for Magny Pitolo, because Magny Pitolo comes out, looks much more technically clean as far as the striking goes. His shots are straighter, they're more accurate, he picks them well, and those teeps to the body were doing fantastically. He gets rocked at the end of the first by Kasanganye, who has about maxed power stats, but only throws these huge, wide, looping punches. And just unfortunately, Magny Pitolo got tired before Kasanganye did. He totally stopped working the body in the second round, tried to get into it a little bit more in the third, but by then it was too late. Kasanganye had too much energy and had landed too much damage and was essentially rocking Magny every time he touched him. I'm excited to see coconut bombs again. Every time I see Magny Pitolo in there, he seems to have improved since the last time, and he puts on a fantastic fight. He's not afraid to engage while also relying on excellent fundamentals. Impa Kasanganye has insane power, but I think as soon as he faces someone who's going to be able to weather that storm while also working the body and making him probably work in the clinch and in the grappling scenarios, he's going to have a really bad time. And I think he's going to run into that person sooner rather than later. I was impressed by what I saw, but the way that Magny was able to survive, roll with shots, and sort of stay in that fight despite the clear power differential, made me think that, moving just a couple rungs up the ladder for Kasanganye is going to drastically affect his chances of winning the farther the fight goes on. He seems very much like an early fight winner, and the way Pitolo was able to drag that out, I think if he fights someone just a little bit better, I think we're going to see him slowly lose his cardio, slowly lose his knockout power, and then after that, all he's got is really wide looping punches, and anyone with a really good straight shots are just going to laser him up. So for him, it's either develop different entries other than leaning your head in and swinging at the guy, or make sure that cardio is really solid, because you don't want to get tired with a fight style like that. Next, we got Zach Cummings versus Alessio Di Chirico. Zach Cummings still got it, man. Still freaking got it. Zach Cummings. What an impressive performance from him. You want to talk about veteran savvy. That is someone at the peak of veteran savviness. And obviously he's, it's funny, out of all the people on this card, I can't believe I'm saying Zach Cummings has still got it. And that kick at the end of the fight absolutely had his number. Di Chirico falls in the rankings again, despite seemingly, looking better, but that's the way it goes. That was a great fight. Caceres versus Austin Springer was barely an event at all. Sean Brady looked amazing versus Christian Aguilera. That guillotine readjustment was gnarly. Oh my God. And he looks good on the feet. Yeah, exactly. He looks good on the feet. The second he got tagged, took the fight down, clamped down, readjusted, relocked in the submission, and what an impressive guillotine choke he has. I'm just super impressed by Sean Brady. Polyana Viana took on Emily Whitmire, beat her by armbar. That was great. Even better was Mallory Martin beating Hannah Cyphers by rear naked choke after Hannah Cyphers put an absolute whooping on her in the first, knocked her down with a huge right hand, followed up, maybe gassed out a little bit, but really more what it was is that Mallory Martin came out the next round, stopped pissing around with the strike, and just straight up took her down and choked her out, which, Hannah Cyphers has proved that she's had some trouble with the fight going to the ground, and it happened again here. Huh. Oh no. What a great night of fights. Some of those are just beautiful, beautiful displays. Okay. And we'll move on. I'm just going to take a quick break, and then we'll move on and discuss this weekend's upcoming card with Alistair Overeem versus Augusto Sakai.